Just before this video starts, I want to give a quick disclaimer. This is going to be more on the joking side than the historical side, okay? Okay, capiche? I'm Cheese. Welcome to Autistic Tank Rant, a new series started by me, designed by me, produced by me, and directed by me. Anywho, today we're talking about the M3 Stuart. Now, the M3 Stuart was produced in the U.S. in 1941, I do believe, and it was supplied to the British over a land lease before the U.S. entered the war. It was an effective tank at the time, effective against early Axis tanks like the Panzer III, Panzer IIs, or the Italian M1340. And, overall, pretty decent. 170 M3s were first deployed as a part of Operation Crusader. But I'm not talking about that. A little bit more about the Panzer III, wrong tank. The M3 Stuart first. We'll talk a bit about that. It weighed around 15.2 metric tons, a light tank at the time. 33,500 pounds. It was a light reconnaissance tank. It was just a little speedy boy coming in at 36 miles per hour. So, pretty fast. It had a 37 M6 cannon. It had a cooled radial engine. I believe it was an airplane engine. It was designed for airplanes and it was put in a tank. Pretty cool. Now, at 15 feet long, 7 feet tall, and 8 feet wide, it was just a little guy, but all tanks at the time were a bit smaller than they came out to be in the end of the war, considering tanks were first developed as anti-infantry, and they didn't really plan on tank-on-tank engagements because they weren't as prominent in World War I. So, in World War II, when they first started, tanks were made small, fast, and lightly armored, so they can be fast to get up to infantry and take out infantry, but once tanks started to get more advanced and more powerful, tank-on-tank engagements became more common. I'm going to head this up. Now, it was a good tank. I do say that. It had 220 horses at 3,400 RPM, like I said, giving it 36 miles per hour. But its one major downside was its fuel capacity. It had a small fuel tank and it drank a lot of gas. So it ran out of gas, I believe, between 70 to 100 miles was its range, which is pretty low. So it wasn't good for long distance runs. And there was another thing about it, which was pointed out by none other than Stalin, of all people. Well, it caught fire pretty easily. And in a quote that Stalin sent to Franklin D. Roosevelt, he said this, and I quote, "I consider it my duty to warn you that, according to our experts at the front, U.S. tanks catch fire very easily when hit from behind or from the side by anti-tank rifle bullets. The reason is that the high-grade gasoline used forms inside the tank a thick layer of highly flammable fumes." End quote. That's right. The M3 needed a high-grade gas, which was pretty much a thorn in the USSR time because their tanks, like the early Russian tanks, I can't name a few, the T-28, I believe, I want to say the T-60, but I think that's the wrong one. But early tanks in the USSR either ran off diesel or low-grade fuel. So M3 needing high-grade fuel was a big logistical problem for them. And once tanks were starting to get up-armored, like Panzer IVs or up-armored Panzer IIIs, heavier tanks were getting introduced, the M3's gun couldn't effectively punch through their armor. And so when the M4 Sherman was introduced, the M3s were moved off the lines and made into a reconnaissance tank. At this point, even though they still had their uses, for tank-on-tank engagements, they were considered almost obsolete because, well, you can't really punch through a heavily armored Tiger with a little M3 Stuart, even though it probably never ran into a Tiger, considering how rare they were in the war. But anywho, there was one spot in the war where if the M3 was going to shine, it was going to shine, and it wasn't going to go down without a fight. That's right, the Pacific Theater. Now, before Japan was about animating kawaii, it was a fierce opponent, believing honorable deaths to be more suitable than a humiliating surrender. Therefore, they didn't like to surrender. They would go out guns a-blazing, even if they knew they would die. So they fought very, very fiercely. So when the U.S. started getting into the islands in the Pacific Theater and they needed tanks, the M4s, the M4A1s, the M4A2s, they struggled in the mountain and jungles in some areas. They're heavyweight, they'd sink in, it would be hard for them to navigate. But one tank decided, hold my beer and watch this. That's right, the M3 Stuart, our good little friend. The M3s performed exceedingly well against Japanese tanks like the Haigo. I believe it's the Haigo. The Haigo, is that right? Yeah, I believe it's the Haigo. And so when they were in there, they did effective because, like I said, the Haigo, their armor was practically paper, even worse than like some early German and Italian tanks. I take that back about Italian tanks. Italian tanks were pretty bad too. Anywho, so the M3 started sticking it out in the Pacific, and it did really good. I'm trying to think here. Oh man. So the M3s, and like I said, they were upgraded. They started out from the M2A4 light tanks, and they were upgraded to the M3 Stuarts. And the M3 Stuarts were upgraded to the M4, and from the M4 they upgraded to the M5. And the M5 was the last iteration of the Stuart line. But they never really were obsolete in World War II. They were used till the end as reconnaissance tanks, and they were pretty cool. They never proved that they were obsolete. They found uses. They were good scouting tanks. They were good reconnaissance tanks. They were good in the Pacific Theater against early Japanese tanks. And even towards the later war, they were great against Japanese tanks. Now, the M3 Stuart is still, if you look at the wiki, it is still listed in active service. It's been used in so many wars. Like, the list goes on. Go look at the wiki. It's just, it got a whole list. And it held out for a good while, but once the M4s were getting upgraded so they could handle the Japanese terrain better, then they started to get pushed back to their reconnaissance tanks position. It proved itself through the war. So the 37mm gun was great against early tanks in the African theater. It was good in the It was good in the war. Got turned to reconnaissance tanks. Pacific Theater rolled around. Was like, hey, let me go in there, and it showed its true colors. Now, going to my thumbnail, one man's trash, another man's treasure. Was the M3 ever really trash? No. It, like I said, reconnaissance tanks, it wasn't good against Panzer IVs or Yak Panthers, any of those. Then you go up to the heavier armored Italian tanks or the Chinu or those from Japan. Then it starts to struggle. But for a while there, it held out in the Pacific Theater. It's crazy. Like this one random, like who thought this little random tank would be like, hold my beer, watch this, and just storm roll through the jungles. It's crazy. Now, I don't know, it's just, oh man, it's like when you get in the rant, it's hard to talk right. So then after, of course, we slapped Japan pretty hard with the big mushroom in here, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Of course, even the M3s were kept in there for, I'm pretty sure they were kept in there. I have to double check, but the M3 never went down without a fight. It kept trying to find ways to prove itself. And it's kind of respectable if you think about it. But hey, this video is getting a little bit long. I was going to keep it a shorter video, but that was my autistic tank rant about the M3 Stuart. Like I said, this is not historical. This is me just talking about tanks I like. This is a 40 millimeter from a ship, not a 37 millimeter from an M3 Stuart. I wish it was, but it's a chunky boy. It's got a ship anchor on the back. It was used in 1942. Yep, right there. I believe, yeah, yep, 1942. So this is around the size of the Stuart shell. That'll give you a good idea. This is I don't know if you saw this. This is a little 50 cal from the first year 50 cals were produced in 1935. But anywho, I'm Cheese. Thank you for watching this one random video about the M3 Stuart. Go read up on it. It's a fun little tank to read about. And like and subscribe and have a good day.